Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Sailing, Heaven-Defying, second in command of the Straw Hat Pirates. Chapter 41. Has your body reached its limit? As the waiter Patty threw the Krieg pirate crew out, many guests who were about to leave stopped and said in surprise. Solved. Isn't that guy from the Krieg pirates? How could his strength be so weak? Could it be that the guy just now was a liar and not from the Krieg pirates at all? Really, otherwise, how could he be thrown out by the restaurant staff? About half an hour later, a loud noise came from outside, causing everyone in the restaurant to stand up suddenly. Many people hurriedly ran outside the restaurant, and when they saw the huge pirate ship not far away, they were all shocked. It's the Krieg pirates. What? That guy before was really from the Krieg pirates. No, this place is going to be ruined. Run, otherwise, it's too late. Just as they swarmed towards the door, the man who had just been driven away walked in carrying a tall man in golden armor on his back. When everyone saw the man on the man's back, they trembled and retreated as if they saw some terrifying beast. The man on this guy's back is Pirate Captain Krieg. Is it too late? I should have run away earlier. However, what happened next was beyond everyone's expectations. The man who was thrown out before knelt down with East Blue Overlord Krieg and begged the restaurant chef who came. Please give us some food. Our captain hasn't eaten for many days. Hearing this, everyone in the restaurant looked at each other in confusion. What's going on? Are these two guys really the infamous Krieg pirates? Could they be pretending? You know, the Krieg pirates are the East Blue Overlord, how could they become like this? But seeing the huge and dilapidated pirate ship on the sea outside, which was set off by the East Blue Overlord pirate flag, they could not tolerate being questioned. They all spoke in a deep voice. No, they are indeed the Krieg pirates. The flag on that huge pirate ship is theirs. That's right, pirate flags can't lie. That means the guy in golden armor is Captain Krieg, who has a bounty of 17 million berries. As Krieg's identity was confirmed, everyone looked at the two with not sympathy, but gloating. What a joke. He is the notorious pirate Krieg. How could we feed such a sinful pirate? Yes, he is so hungry now that he has no strength. If he recovers, we will definitely be killed by them. Let's just leave him out and wait for him to starve to death. This is also considered as removing a piece of garbage from the sea. Everyone around looked at Krieg, who was so hungry that he had no strength at all, and sneered and mocked him. Facing everyone's sneers and mockery, the man who supported Krieg still knelt on his knees and begged the restaurant chefs. Don't worry, everyone, just give us some food and we'll leave here right away. We will never retaliate against you. Please believe me. But no matter how the man begged for mercy, everyone still looked at the two with sneer, looking at them with disdain, without any action. At this moment, a man in a black suit with a cigarette in his mouth walked out of the kitchen. Sorry, I can't watch people die of hunger. Sanji raised his eyebrows, stared at the man who knelt down and kept begging, blew out a puff of smoke, and spoke lightly. Hearing this voice, Luffy, who had been eating with his head down, raised his head for the first time, not caring about the food in his mouth, glanced at Sanji, and then turned to look at Beano's beside him. He said secretly, "Is Beano's talking about him?" Beano's also noticed Luffy's gaze, nodded slightly, and then continued to close his eyes and wait for the man to arrive. On the other side, Sanji had already taken out food from the kitchen and handed it to the man. Thank you. The man was grateful and kowtowed to Sanji twice. Then he helped the Captain Krieg beside him and started eating like crazy. Because of extreme hunger, Krieg had no strength to fight back against everyone's ridicule. But he had made up his mind that as long as he was full, he would definitely kill these ants one by one. Sanji, are you crazy? This is the great pirate Krieg, why give them food? Once he recovers his strength, all of us here will be wiped out by him. Sanji's actions immediately aroused the anger of the crowd, and they shouted loudly. Sorry, I'm a chef. I can't watch people die in front of me because of hunger. Sanji threw away the burnt cigarette, stomped it out with his black feet, and responded in a deep voice. Bang! However, before he finished speaking, a tall figure suddenly appeared in front of him, accompanied by a strong wind. Boom! Sanji's entire body was suddenly knocked out, smashing many things in the restaurant and falling to the ground. HMPH. With a cold snort, Krieg, who was originally hungry, slowly retracted his fist, looked around at all the people who had not yet reacted, and said gloomily, "Ants, don't think that the food just now can buy your lives." The people who reacted looked at Krieg, who had a hideous face and exuded a fierce and evil spirit, and their legs trembled with fear and their mouths opened wide. Regret rose in his heart. If he had known earlier, he would have killed Krieg when he could not move. If it weren't for that guy with a pair of eagle-like eyes, I wouldn't be so embarrassed. Recalling that man with a pair of eagle-like sharp eyes, he raised his hand to destroy the entire fleet of his Krieg pirates. While the shame rose in his heart, there was more fear. Facing Krieg's story, the chefs and diners were full of question marks. A man as sharp as an eagle. Could it be that the reason why the great pirate Krieg was in such a mess was because of him? How is that possible? Krieg is the overlord of East Blue, and he has more than 50 fleets under his command. Eyes as sharp as an eagle. Could it be him? Zoro, who had no interest in these things, frowned after hearing Krieg's story, and the figure of that man appeared in his mind. The world's greatest swordsman, Hawkeye Mihawk, the dream and goal of standing at the top of the world. At this time, Benos, who had closed his eyes to rest, seemed to feel something, opened his eyes suddenly, and turned his eyes through the window to the sea outside. He said in a low voice, "Is it coming?" As Benos's voice fell, everyone in the restaurant looked at the black spot on the sea outside, which was gradually approaching. As the black spot approached, a small sailboat lit candles on both sides, but the fire it revealed was green, and a cross coffin stood on the boat. Sitting in front was a man wearing a black hat, a wine-colored shirt, a black windbreaker, and a long black sword like a cross on his back. At first glance, the whole person gave people an extremely cold feeling. Krieg saw this scene, his pupils suddenly contracted, and his fear of the man in his heart became stronger and stronger, and even his whole body couldn't help but take 2 steps back. He kept shaking his head and muttering, "No, impossible. How could this guy chase here?" At the same time, a few people in the restaurant saw the man's outfit on the small sailboat, and hurriedly took out a bounty picture for comparison, and was immediately frightened and collapsed on the ground. He exclaimed loudly, He is." Zoro, who was beside Luffy, stood up suddenly, staring at the man on the small sailboat. His inner fighting spirit rose rapidly, and his blood began to surge. He knew that the man in front of him was his lifelong goal. He was also the person he wanted to challenge with his inner dream. The world's #1 swordsman, Hawkeye Mihawk. Many of the surviving Krieg pirates' crew members trembled as if they had encountered a monster, looking at the approaching Mihawk. What should we do? Captain Krieg, that guy is really chasing us. Didn't this guy destroy more than 50 fleets? Is he not going to let us go? Feeling the breath emanating from the small sailboat, Benos, who was originally lazy, couldn't help but become serious. Murmured, "What a powerful sword intent, worthy of being the world's #1 swordsman. Even the 4 emperors of the New World would be afraid of Hawkeye Mihawk. I wonder how strong he is." The people in the sea restaurant listened to the story of the Krieg pirates' crew members and looked incredible. What? He is the man who destroyed more than 50 fleets under the Krieg pirates. Is it true? Only one person can destroy all the fleets of the East Blue Overlord. Hey, did you notice that just by sitting there, that guy can make people feel an irresistible and terrible pressure? Indeed, Zizi, and the big sword on Benos' waist, Lei Yu, seemed to feel something, and began to emit strands of purple lightning, constantly agitated. Even you feel it. Benos reached out and grasped the hilt, suppressing the constantly agitated Lei Yu and murmured. Tap tap. Captain Krieg clenched his fists, his heart filled with anger and shame, and shouted at Mihawk on the small sailboat. Why, more than 50 fleets under my command have been sunk by you, why do you still want to kill them all? Mihawk raised his head slightly, and his pair of yellow pupils as sharp as an eagle looked directly at Krieg. He said expressionlessly, "Killing time." After these words fell, Krieg and the remaining crew members were instantly furious, and even felt deeply humiliated. Although the Krieg pirates were defeated, many crew members completely lost their minds after hearing Mihawk's words, and raised their guns to aim at Mihawk. With shame and anger, they pulled the trigger without hesitation. What a joke, fool. Go to hell. Bang bang bang. Facing the incoming bullets, Mihawk did not choose to draw his sword, but just swayed slightly, avoiding all the incoming bullets one by one. Seeing this scene, the angry Krieg pirates crew members, who were originally in shame, were stunned in place, and their guns in their hands almost fell. How is this possible? How did he do it? Why can't so many bullets hit? We should have aimed at this guy. Just when everyone was in shock, a figure slowly walked out of the crowd, directly past Krieg and others, and came to the fence. Tap tap. Everyone was puzzled when they saw this, but they were surprised when they saw Zoro's face and the 3 swords hanging on his waist. Short green hair, 3 swords hanging on his waist. He is the pirate hunter Roronoa Zoro. Seeing this scene, everyone naturally understood why the pirate hunter Zoro stood up. As a swordsman, Roronoa Zoro would naturally challenge the world's recognized strongest swordsman. After all, this is the dream and honor of all swordsmen. If he can defeat the world's #1 swordsman Hawkeye Mihawk, the reputation and honor of the most powerful swordsman will sweep all over the world. Zoro put his right hand on the 3 swords on his waist, turned to Benos on Luffy's side, grinned, and said confidently, "I will challenge the vice captain first, is it okay?" Although he knew the outcome, Benos would not stop him. After all, Zoro was carrying the dreams of 2 people and becoming the world's #1 swordsman. Of course, Zoro realized the strength of the world's strongest swordsman, and Benos's next plan was perfectly implemented. Well, move forward. Looking into Mihawk's eyes, Zoro's fighting spirit could not help but rise. His body sank slightly, his hands on the 3 swords on his waist, and slowly pulled them out. Sure enough, he is known as the world's most powerful swordsman. I chose to go to sea just for you. Mihawk did not raise his eyes to look at Zoro, sitting there, speaking calmly. What's the purpose? Zoro reached out to take off the black headscarf on his shoulders, tied it on his forehead, and grinned with confidence on his face. The world's greatest swordsman. Mihawk glanced at Zoro, then looked at Benos and Luffy behind him, frowned, and said calmly, "Really, I will not refuse the challenge of a swordsman. But I need to confirm something first." Swoosh. As Mihawk's voice fell, his entire figure completely disappeared in the small sailboat. Disappeared. No, he's there. When everyone reacted, Mihawk's figure suddenly appeared behind Zoro, with a pair of sharp eyes like an eagle, staring at Benos and Luffy on the side. Speaking indifferently, "I've been asked to test your strength. Of course, if necessary, your voyage will end here." There was no killing intent in Mihawk's eyes. His purpose was clear. He just wanted to confirm the strength of Benos and Luffy. Of course, if necessary, he would cut off the voyage of the Straw Hat Pirates. Facing Mihawk, who didn't take him seriously at all, Zoro's anger slowly rose. He stretched out his hand to bite the Wado Ikimonji in front of his mouth, holding the knife with both hands, and shouted, "If you want to attack my 2 captains, then defeat me first." As soon as he finished speaking, Zoro's figure sank, and the 3-sword style came out, rushing towards Mihawk. 3-sword style. Facing Zoro's attack, Mihawk just glanced at the other party, then took out a small knife, and faced Zoro's attack. "Don't look down on me. Demon slash." Seeing the small knife taken out by Mihawk, Zoro's anger rose sharply, and he burst out with all his strength and was determined to defeat Mihawk. Feeling the aura and anger emanating from Zoro, the people around him showed fear. "Are you angry? Isn't the world's greatest swordsman Hawkeye Mihawk too arrogant?" Facing the pirate hunter Zoro, he only chose a small knife to fight. What a strong aura, worthy of being the pirate hunter Zoro, the strength of swordsmanship. There is basically no opponent who can compete with him in East Blue. Yes, maybe Roronoa Zoro can successfully win the throne of the world's greatest swordsman. Humph, in my opinion, Hawkeye will definitely pay for his arrogance. Listening to the discussions around and Mihawk's arrogance, Nami and Usopp seemed to have confidence in Zoro and asked Luffy and Benos beside them. "Luffy, Benos, Zoro should defeat this mustache guy in front of him, right?" Luffy stared at Mihawk with his fists clenched. Just now, he felt an extremely terrifying aura from Mihawk, and this aura seemed to be even more terrifying than Benos. He shook his head and said firmly, "Although I don't want to admit it, Zoro is not that guy's opponent." Hearing Luffy's words, Sanji, who came to Nami at some point, showed surprise. Although he had an inexplicable dislike for Zoro, the green algae head, he was clear about the strong aura Zoro showed. "Usopp," Nami shouted with disbelief. "No way, Even Zoro is not his opponent. Why do I think he is not powerful? Bano, what do you think of Zoro's battle? Benos just shook his head slightly and remained silent. In his eyes, there was no suspense at all in the battle between the two, and the gap in strength was too big. With a crisp sound of weapons colliding, the fact was naturally verified. Ding! Zoro's full-strength attack was steadily blocked by the knife in Mihawk's hand. No matter how hard Zoro tried, he couldn't break the restraint of the knife. I can't move. How did he do it? No one can see through this move, how could such a thing happen? No way. Zoro couldn't accept it at all when he saw that his proud secret was easily blocked. He swung the three-sword style and slashed at Mihawk. Bang bang bang. But facing the continuous attack, Mihawk remained calm and easily blocked the attack again and again. What a fierce sword, but it's just that. Ding. Ah. Mihawk caught Zoro's flaw and slashed him away in an instant. What? How is this possible? Pirate hunter Zoro was chopped off by Hawkeye with a knife. Is this the world's greatest swordsman? With just a knife in hand, he easily blocked Roronoa Zoro's fierce attack and instantly knocked him away. Everyone watched Zoro gain the upper hand, and the fierce attack forced Mihawk to retreat again and again, thinking that this duel between swordsmen was about to end. Who knew that in just a blink of an eye, the situation was reversed in an instant. Hey, Luffy, what should we do with Benos? Zoro may be in trouble if he continues like this, should we? Looking at Zoro, who was easily chopped off, Nami and Usopp asked with concern. Although Luffy knew that this was a duel between swordsmen, if he took action, he might be dissatisfied with Zoro, and Luffy realized that even if he tried his best, he was not sure to save Zoro. Thinking of this, Luffy subconsciously looked at Benos beside him and said in a deep voice. Benos. Benos naturally understood what Luffy meant, nodded slightly, and focused his attention on the two people on the battlefield. Zoro gritted his teeth and stood up quickly, raised his hands and put the two swords behind his shoulders, and rushed towards Mihawk again with his feet, shouting angrily. Tiger hunting. Mihawk narrowed his eyes like an eagle, stepped out, and swept forward with the knife in his right hand. In an instant, Zoro's original fierce attack was instantly stopped, and his eyes were fixed on the knife inserted into his chest, and his eyes widened. Puff! The next moment, blood spurted out through the Wado Ikimonji. Do you want me to pierce your heart like this? Zoro's chest was stained with blood, and his whole body began to tremble, but the dream in his heart would not allow him to fall down. I don't know, I always feel that if I take a step back here, the oaths and promises that I have always cherished will be completely broken. Mihawk frowned slightly, looked up at Zoro with a look of appreciation, and said in a low voice. Yes, this is defeat. Even if the next step is death. Zoro's eyes showed unprecedented determination. Although he was severely injured, he still grinned and responded. It's a relief to die. Mihawk's eyes were slightly raised. Zoro's answer made him curious about the young swordsman in front of him. He thought to himself, with a strong will, he would rather die in battle than choose to live. Pull out the knife inserted into Zoro's chest and ask in a deep voice. Boy, tell me your name. Roronoa Zoro. Zoro responded firmly, and at the same time, he put his hands together and formed three knives into a windmill. At this moment, he has chosen to put life and death aside and use his last trump card to put an end to this battle. I will remember you, a strong man I haven't seen for a long time. I will end your life with the gift of a swordsman, using the world's strongest black knife. His originally expressionless face showed a slight frown, and he reached out to the handle of the black knife, the night knife on his back, and suddenly pulled it out, responding seriously. This is also the last blow. If you fail, it ends here. Do you choose to be the world's #1 or die? Zoro closed his eyes tightly, and the scene of the original agreement with that person flashed in his mind. Then he suddenly opened his eyes, and the sword intent around him became stronger than before. Go to hell. The black knife moved, and Mihawk's aura gushed out like a beast. His figure sank slightly and flew towards Zoro on the opposite side. Three swords style secret. Zoro was not to be outdone. His two swords kept spinning in his hands, and in an instant, a strong whirlwind of sword intent was set off. While shouting, his figure suddenly came forward. 3,000 worlds. Dang! The violent movement of the weapons and the collision resounded all around. The two figures in the restaurant who saw them on the battlefield held their breath and came back to their senses after a long while. Has the winner been decided? It should be. But who won between the two of them? Nami, Usopp, and Sanji were also stunned, staring at the two people on the battlefield, and asked subconsciously. Did Zoro win? At the same time, Luffy was eager to know the answer, and looked at Benos. Benos shook his head slightly and responded in a deep voice. Defeated. That guy is known as the world's greatest swordsman. Even the 4 emperors of the New World are afraid of him. Zoro can't compete with him at the moment. Luffy's face became heavy when he heard it, and he muttered to himself. As strong as Shanks. Back on the battlefield, Zoro, who was still attacking, staggered suddenly, and the 2 swords in his hands were completely shattered in an instant. Bang bang. The chest, which was originally stained with blood, was hit again and blood gushed out. He thought to himself, is he defeated just like that? I'm so unwilling. We're so close to our promise and dream. However, Mihawk did not choose to stop, and raised the supreme sword, the black sword, and slashed at Zoro. Even though Zoro accepted the defeat, he did not choose to escape from death. He slowly turned around, opened his hands, and closed his eyes. Being stabbed in the back is a shame for a swordsman. Mihawk was slightly stunned when he saw this, and instantly understood Zoro's intention. He admired this young swordsman in his heart. If he could survive this attack, there might be a strong man standing at the top in the future sea. He did not stop the attack in his hand, and was ready to give a fatal blow to Zoro's chest. Just when the sharp black knife was about to cut Zoro's chest. Swoosh, zitza. Suddenly, a figure swept in front of Zoro, and the knife light was accompanied by sizzling lightning, facing the supreme fast knife Black Knife Knight. Ding, buzz, accompanied by a strong collision, a terrifying airflow suddenly raised a terrifying airflow, instantly blowing Zoro away. Mihawk raised his eyes as sharp as an eagle, staring at the young figure blocking in front of him, with a solemn look on his face. Speak lightly, Benos. Benos blocked the way of the black knife steadily, and said lazily with a slight smile on his lips. How can I let you succeed, the world's #1 swordsman Hawkeye Mihawk? Feeling the terrifying sword intent rising from Mihawk, Benos was secretly shocked. Although he was extremely confident in his swordsmanship, he knew that this was his first time to fight a strong man standing at the top of the world. All those who thought Zoro's life was over were shocked when they saw that figure blocking Mihawk's attack steadily. Blocked, blocked. Hawkeye's fierce attack was actually blocked by this young man. Really, who is this guy? Is this the number on the bounty list? I don't know, but judging from the current situation, this guy should be very strong, otherwise how could he block the attack of the world's #1 swordsman? On the other side, the Straw Hat crew was not idle either. After seeing Zoro being blown away by the airflow generated by the collision, Luffy quickly stretched out his right hand and grabbed the seriously injured and unconscious Zoro. Nami, Usopp, help. Ah, okay. Zoro, don't die. Nami, Usopp, with worried faces, hurriedly helped bandage Zoro's terrible chest injury. Back to the battlefield, the two people who were originally in a stalemate inexplicably retracted their famous swords in their hands, and at the same time, the other party pulled away. Facing Hawkeye Mihawk, Benos did not relax at all and was in high spirits. Let me see how strong the great swordsman known as the strongest is. Pop. The right hand holding the great sword Lei moved, and the black armament Haki instantly covered the blade and swung it towards Mihawk in front of him. Ichidao Lu Guilin. Zhang. As everyone was shocked, a fierce light blue slash tore through the deck under his feet and rushed towards Mihawk. Mihawk faced the slash that was approaching him, but a smile appeared on his face. He did not move and swung the black knife with one hand. Ding! The two dark green and light blue terrible slashes collided with each other, suddenly causing a strong air flow, and even the originally calm sea around began to surge. Is this a real sword duel? How is this possible? How can humans have such a terrifying power? Looking at the battlefield covered by dark green and light blue, and the terrible slashes that were still competing with each other, everyone in the restaurant, except Luffy, widened their eyes in disbelief. After all, the current battlefield scene was obviously beyond their imagination. Is this a duel between real strong men? The gap in strength is so huge. Sanji raised his curly hair and stared at the destruction caused by the slash on the battlefield. The cigarette in his hand subconsciously fell on the deck, and he was full of fear and dread in his heart. If one of them was his opponent, he would not even have the chance to dodge the slash. And the two of them had already far exceeded his strength. Although the slashes were deadlocked, they did not cause a huge disaster. But he knew that any slash from either side could cut the sea restaurant and the Krieg pirate ship in half. Bang! As the two slashes were deadlocked and could not break the other's boundaries, they immediately rushed towards the blue sky until they disappeared completely. Mihawk's mouth curled up slightly, looking at Beano's opposite, with full admiration in his eyes. After all, at Beano's age, he could achieve this level of swordsmanship, and it was not an exaggeration to call him a swordsmanship genius. It's a good strike, and it's more powerful than what the intelligence said. There are only a few people in this sea who have practiced swordsmanship to this level at this age. This is the admiration and recognition from the world's #1 swordsman Hawkeye Mihawk. If it were any other swordsman, they would naturally be proud of it. But in Beano's eyes, there is nothing to be proud of. After all, his goal is not to be the world's #1 swordsman. Beano's looked at the battlefield left by the two slashes, and he became more and more afraid of Mihawk's swordsmanship. He didn't expect that Mihawk could resolve his attack instantly with a casual slash without relying on the blessing of armament Haki. He whispered in amazement, "Can't you take advantage of the opportunity? You are worthy of being called the world's #1 swordsman. Sure enough, you are as strong as a monster." However, Beano's swordsmanship has already aroused the fighting spirit among the swordsmen. Mihawk's mouth curled up slightly, and a trace of coldness flashed through his sharp eyes like an eagle. He raised the black knife in his hand and swung it again. Just by swinging it, a gust of wind suddenly rose around, which made Beano's quickly put the thunder guard in his hand in front of him and waited for it. The seemingly casual swing made Beano's feel uneasy. This feeling was like the actual battle with Garp on the uninhabited island. But he did not feel a sense of crisis on Garp like Mihawk in front of him. Jung. As the black knife fell suddenly, it locked Beano's position with a black jade slash and attacked quickly. Beano's did not hesitate to sink slightly and put the thunder guard in his right hand over his back shoulder. At this moment, the sword intent around him suddenly rose, and his feet moved, and his body jumped up, slashing towards the rapidly approaching. Whispering, Aikito Ryu Ki. Roar. A dragon roared throughout the battlefield, scaring everyone in the restaurant in the distance. How could there be a roar of a beast? No, it's not a roar of a beast, look. Accompanied by the roar of the dragon, the thunder guard with armament Haki swung down fiercely. Dragon hunting. Roar. A ferocious dragon opened its bloody mouth and slashed at the black jade in front of it. Boom boom. The two terrifying attacks collided violently, and the aftermath of the slash instantly raged around. Seeing this, everyone in the restaurant ignored the wonderful special effects and tried their best to stay away from the battlefield with visual impact. Swoosh. Quick, drive the restaurant away from the sea, away from the battlefield between them. Or both of them monsters. Even at such a long distance, we were almost affected. At this time, the aftermath of the slashing that was raging around passed the right side of the restaurant at a speed visible to the naked eye, scaring everyone in the restaurant and shouting at the chef. As if everyone had escaped death, they spoke in unison with horror. 2. Scary. Is this the duel between the top masters? I didn't expect that the young swordsman was so powerful that he could fight against the world's #1 swordsman. That's right, just this one blow from the young swordsman can completely destroy more than 50 fleets under the Krieg pirates. Sanji, who was also shocked, stared at the two people who kept swinging their swords on the battlefield, and then subconsciously looked at Luffy, Nami, Usopp and the unconscious green algae head who were in the same group as Beano's. Although he was already shocked by the strength of the green algae head who challenged Hawkeye before, his vision was still too narrow after witnessing the battle at this moment. Muttering to himself, are these guys really newcomers who just went to sea? Just the strength of the green algae head alone, even if I use all my strength, I can't defeat it, let alone this terrible monster called Beano's. The battle between Beano's and Mihawk really made him feel what a high-end duel is. Compared with himself, he is like an ant. Back to the battlefield. Swoosh. In the smoke and dust, Beano's figure turned into a residual shadow and swept in front of Mihawk. His body was in a posture of drawing a sword, and he raised his eyes slightly and murmured. Black sword-style light singing. Boom. The low voice fell, and the whole body was shrouded by the light blue sword intent, and he rushed towards Mihawk. Draw the sword. Swoosh. Seeing this, Mihawk's expressionless face showed a trace of solemnity, and he waved the black knife Yej in his hand to block in front of him. Ding. Hoo-hoo. When Lei Yu and He Dao Yi touched, sparks flew, violent airflow raged, and the air seemed to become distorted. Benos frowned. He didn't expect that his sword slash was blocked by Mihawk. Not only that, Benos noticed that since he started fighting with Mihawk, he had been taking all his attacks with one hand, and he didn't use Haki. Thinking of this, Benos became more and more unhappy, holding the hand of He Dao Lei Yu tightly, and the blue veins began to bulge, and the stalemate became stronger and stronger. Feeling the powerful force from He Dao Yi, Mihawk's body sank slightly, and his inner shock was no less than Benos. He didn't expect Benos's strength to far exceed the information from Naval Headquarters. He originally thought that no matter how strong the newcomers who had just gone to sea were, they couldn't be that strong. It was nothing more than the problem of Benos awakening Conqueror's Haki. But he didn't expect that Benos could fight him to this point with swordsmanship alone without releasing Conqueror's Haki, which was completely beyond everyone's expectations. Mihawk stopped thinking and looked at his opponent with his sharp eyes like an eagle. Caw. He tightly grasped the hand of Black Blade Knight, and his veins suddenly bulged. He shook Benos away with absolute strength. Buzz. Then he waved Black Blade Knight again without hesitation, and slashed towards Benos's backward flying position with a black jade slash. Benos, who was shaken into the air, quickly stabilized his body, raised the Black Blade Thunder in his hand and slashed down. Black Blade Flow Extreme Yuanming. Zhang. Boom boom. The fierce slashing collision, the two sides stalemated for a few seconds, and then with a loud explosion, each broke apart. The strong aftermath of the explosion once again threw Benos away, and he turned in the air, and then fell back to the broken deck. But it was obvious that Mihawk was slightly better in this collision. Before Benos could catch his breath, the black knife Yi in Mihawk's hand suddenly appeared above Benos' head. The sudden speed almost caught Benos off guard, and he quickly raised the black knife Lei Yu in his hand to block. Ding! The powerful collision, the two sides suddenly showed a fierce sword confrontation. Dong! Caw. Benos, who was bearing the terrifying force head-on, suddenly sank under his feet, and in an instant the wooden deck could no longer hold on and shattered. Benos frowned under the pressure of the explosion of the black knife Yi. Secretly said, "What a sudden speed. It turns out that facing such a top strongman, my combat experience is still far behind. But this strength alone is enough to defeat me." He held the black knife Lei Yu tightly and exerted force. Suddenly, a terrifying force suddenly burst out, forcing the black knife Yi and Mihawk above his head to retreat. Bang! Swish! Mihawk's figure fell on the deck, leaving a trace before stopping. He looked at Benos with surprise. The power that Benos had just burst out obviously surprised him. I thought that this young swordsman was good enough to reach this level, but now it seems that Benos has a stronger power hidden in his body. Thinking of this, Mihawk's fighting spirit rose more and more, and he raised the supreme big knife Black Knife Knight, but this time he did not use only one hand to hold the knife as before, but chose two hands. Many people in the sea restaurant in the distance also noticed that Mihawk held the knife with both hands, and they all showed astonishment on their faces. As the world's greatest swordsman going to fight seriously. With only one hand holding the sword, he has suppressed the young swordsman. If he uses two hands, then wouldn't this young swordsman be defeated in no time? HMPH. Although it's unbelievable, I have to say that the young swordsman was able to force Hawkeye Mihawk to use two hands to hold the sword and take it seriously. His swordsmanship and talent are already a monster. If he doesn't die in this battle, it won't be long before his name shakes the world. Just when everyone saw Mihawk holding the sword with both hands and thought that Benos would be defeated, Luffy was full of confidence in Benos' strength. Compared with Nami, Usopp and Zoro who was in a coma, Luffy was quite clear about Benos' strength. This level alone was not enough to defeat Benos. You have to know that when he was kidnapped by the guys from the Goya Kingdom, Benos completely split the entire royal city in two with one blow. Moreover, Benos was only 8 years old at that time. Although Benos had been strong for so many years, even he had no answer. But he firmly believed that even the world's #1 swordsman would find it difficult to defeat Benos now. Looking at the surging aura on Benos, Mihawk was more and more expectant. He didn't expect Benos to give him so many unexpected joys. Said lightly, "If you still want to hide, then this battle between swordsmen should end here." Facing Mihawk's provocation, Benos frowned, but the next second he understood the other party's intention and grinned. "Really? If you can end it, try it." Since Mihawk had noticed it, Benos didn't need to hide, and planned to show his true strength. "Hey Luffy, can Benos really beat him?" "Yeah, although we know Benos is strong, he is facing the world's recognized #1 swordsman." Nami, Usopp seemed to realize the end of this battle, with a worried look on his face, and asked Luffy beside him. "Don't worry, Benos will not lose. He is our vice captain of the Straw Hat Pirates, Benos." Hearing Luffy's firm response, Nami, Usopp felt relieved, but Sanji standing beside them didn't think so. He admitted that this guy named Benos was strong, like a monster, but he was facing Hawkeye Mihawk, and it was only a matter of time before he was defeated. Back to the battlefield. Buzz. As the Supreme Sword, Black Blade, Knight, rang, Mihawk's aura completely changed, as if a terrifying pressure was emerging in the air and spreading to the surroundings. At this time, the hands holding the Black Blade, Knight, moved, and the sharp eyes stared directly at Benos opposite, as if he had completely seen through him. Without hesitation, he swung it down strongly. Jung. A buzzing sounded, and then the entire surroundings were instantly covered with black jade. A slash that was even more terrifying than just now suddenly appeared, with a force that was overwhelming, and crushed towards Benos. At the same time, Benos also moved, raising his right hand holding the black blade, Lei, and a pink flame slowly wrapped around and extended the entire blade of the black blade, Lei. He was muttering something in his mouth. All those who were originally attracted by Mihawk's terrifying slash widened their eyes when they saw Benos' entire right arm wrapped in pink flames. What happened to that guy's right hand? Pink flame. What's going on? Could that guy be some kind of demon fruit power? Hawkeye Mihawk narrowed his eyes and stared at the pink flames surrounding Benos' right arm, his face showing excitement and muttering. What a young monster. Benos faced the rapidly approaching terrifying slash and did not choose to dodge. Instead, he went head-on towards the slash, which shocked the spectators. What is this guy going to do? Is he crazy? Looking for death. Under the puzzled eyes of everyone, Benos jumped up, like a cannonball, and held the black knife Lei wrapped in pink flames across his chest. A gleam of light flashed in his sharp eyes, and he chanted. The myriad worlds are divided into countless small worlds. This world finally gathers into one. This is called the world of the Great Thousand Worlds. I am the master of this world. Benos' aura surged like a flood, and his chanting resounded through the sky. One sword flow. Secret meaning. Falling thousands of worlds. Clang. The clanging sound shook the heaven and earth, and collided head-on with the black jade slash. For a moment, the atmosphere at the center of the collision seemed to be completely torn apart at this moment. The surging sword intent turned into a violent gale, raging in all directions. Even the restaurant on the sea, which had long been far away from the battlefield, was almost capsized by this violent power. It can still be affected by such a terrible impact even at such a distance. The people watching the battle on the boat ignored the fierceness of the battlefield, and hugged the guardrails that could support it from being blown away by the gale, shouting anxiously. Stop meowing. Where are the people in the restaurant? Hurry up. Drive the boat away. Are you going to die here? The chefs in the restaurant heard the reminder and rushed to the cabin in the strong wind, and immediately moved away from the center of the battlefield. At this time, the sea around the battlefield was surging, and there was a diversion under the raging aftermath of the slash, and even several bottomless Uzumaki formed around. Mihawk glanced down at the broken deck and the pirate ship that sank in the sea under his feet, with surprise in his eyes, and his inner view of Benos' strength changed greatly. He didn't expect that this East Blue, a symbol of peace, actually had a swordsman who could practice armament Haki to that level. He underestimated it. Just from the pink flames surrounding Benos' right arm, there is no doubt that the young swordsman in front of him already has the terrible power of those guys in New World. Chuckling. A monster-like young swordsman. Bang. The figure of Benos in midair suddenly fell on the damaged deck. The white t-shirt he was wearing was torn in the explosion. Benos slowly raised his eyes. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He was breathing heavily and whispered with a solemn look. As expected of the world's #1 swordsman, the slash he launched can simply cut the sea with a sword. It seems that the gap in swordsmanship has been reflected from the beginning. If it weren't for Haki's blessing, this battle would have ended long ago. Mihawk's figure still stood on the broken deck. Facing the explosion just now, he was not affected at all, but he also felt numbness in the palm of his hand holding the knife under that blow. All the people in the sea restaurant hundreds of meters away, relying on telescopes to watch the figure of Benos standing in the distance on the sea, were shocked. Wow, so awesome. That young swordsman was actually able to remain intact despite the terrifying explosion just now. Yes, that terrifying slashing collision instantly shattered Krieg's huge pirate ship. I didn't expect that our East Blue would have a swordsmanship expert who is no less powerful than the world's greatest swordsman. The key is that the guy looks only 18 or 19 years old, but he has terrifying swordsmanship skills at such a young age, even if he can't take the throne of the world's greatest swordsman this time. I think it won't be long before he can pull Hawkeye Mihawk off the altar. ... Mihawk looked at Benos standing opposite with his sharp eyes like an eagle, and exclaimed. Just torn clothes. What a scary kid. At this age, he has surpassed countless swordsmanship geniuses on the sea. Even I, at that time, I am afraid I couldn't do it. But, just this level is not enough to ascend to the throne of the world's greatest swordsman. Swoosh. Mihawk's figure was as fast as a shadow, and he flew towards Benos's position at a high speed. This made the people watching the battle with a telescope suddenly startled and completely lost their target. Where is the person? Disappeared. Mihawk's figure was as fast as lightning, and even Luffy, the strongest person in the restaurant on the sea, could not catch Mihawk's movement trajectory. Seeing this, Benos's face suddenly became solemn, and he quickly got up to his full attention and raised the Black Knife Thunder Guard to meet the next confrontation. Buzz. This speed, if you don't know, you might think it's Kizaru. The sound of the knife came into Benos' ears. Facing the lightning-fast speed, Benos had no time to dodge at this moment, and quickly raised the Black Knife Thunder Guard to resist. Ding! The fierce attack was blocked, but Mihawk did not intend to stop, but continued to slash at Benos. Although Mihawk's attack was simple and rough, the force of each slash forced Benos to defend. As the force became heavier, Benos's hands were shocked to numbness and pain in the palm of his hand, and he was suppressed by Mihawk for a while. Looking at the countless phantoms of the Black Knife Knight, the people watching the battle from a distance widened their eyes. Ding ding ding. The sound of the weapons clashing resounded through the surrounding sea, and countless sparks flew every time the swords collided, accompanied by terrible airflows that set off layers of whirlwinds. However, Benos, who was suppressed by Mihawk's fierce attack, naturally would not choose to defend blindly. He raised his hand to launch a counterattack in the gap of resistance. For a while, the two figures collided at high speed like phantoms, and the battle became more and more intense. But under the fierce collision, the raging aftermath ripped through Benos' clothes and even his body, and scars appeared one after another. On the other side, Mihawk only had his shoulder clothes slashed open by several cuts. But the high-speed collision between the two figures did not stop, but became more and more intense, with swords and shadows everywhere, collisions and sparks flying. Just as the two collided violently in midair and retreated a distance. Pop! The hands holding the Black Blade Knight were covered by the pitch-black armament Haki, which made the originally inky Black Blade Knight suddenly emit a terrifying chill. The Supreme Great Blade Black Blade Knight was originally nourished by Mihawk's Haki to become a Black Blade. Even without the addition of armament Haki, it is no less powerful than the covered Black Blade. Now with the addition of armament Haki, the blade of Black Blade Knight is even sharper and more terrifying. You have been able to hold on until now. You are the first swordsman I recognize among the new generation. Even those famous swordsmen on the sea are probably not as good as you. Even in the new world, there are only two palms that can compare with you. But there is still a distance to the throne of the world's greatest swordsman. Everyone was shocked by the recognition from the world's greatest swordsman, Hawkeye Mihawk. They naturally knew the meaning of it. Obviously, the strength of this young swordsman has the qualifications to stand at the top of the sea. However, Benos did not need Mihawk's affirmation. After all, His real goal was to know the blank 100-year history that the world government tried hard to hide. Benos spat out a mouthful of dirty blood and glanced at the scars on his body caused by the aftermath of the slash. His eyes became sharper and his fighting spirit continued to rise. Sensing the changes in Benos, Mihawk's mouth corners slightly raised. After all, Benos gave him too many surprises, and spoke lightly. Goodwill, but this duel between swordsmen should also come to an end. After seeing the trump card exposed by Benos, Mihawk gradually lost his patience, although Benos has never released the Conqueror's Haki mentioned in the intelligence. But in the face of absolute strength, Conqueror's Haki has almost no effect on a strong man like him, unless it is like the red-haired guy. Already at a disadvantage, Benos could not resist the high-frequency and intensive attack with armament Haki. For a while, the injuries on his body increased, and the whole person was forced to be unable to resist, and his breathing and resistance became chaotic. In the eyes of everyone, Benos was already in a disadvantage, and it would not take long for Mihawk to defeat him. At the same time, the blade that originally maintained the pink arrogance gradually dissipated, leaving only the black armed barely defending, and his hands tightly blocked the intensive slashing. He panted heavily and murmured, "What a mess. This is the second time I've been cornered. But I'm not even close to losing." As the voice fell, a terrifying pressure suddenly emerged from Benos's messy body. Buzz. Boom. Instantly, it broke through Mihawk's repeated attacks and enveloped all directions. Ziz. At the same time, the space in front of him seemed to be stagnant, and the originally blue sky above was suddenly covered by dark clouds, and lightning struck the surrounding sea unconsciously. This is Conqueror's Haki. Mihawk stabilized his body and stood on the broken deck. His sharp eagle eyes stared at Benos, who was exploding with pressure like a ferocious beast, and his face showed shock. At this moment, he felt a sense of crisis in his heart, and he actually felt the same terrible pressure from Benos as that man. Mihawk, a friend of Four Emperors' red hair, was naturally very clear about the Conqueror's Haki stage outbreak. It was obvious that the Conqueror's Haki released by Benos was not only as skillfully controlled as described by the marine intelligence, but in his opinion, it already had the tendency to stand at the top. Mihawk glanced at the gradually darkening sea around him and the countless fish floating on the sea, and whispered in admiration. Exquisite swordsmanship, expensive weapon pink, and Conqueror's Haki. The sea is getting interesting next. Such a strong Conqueror's Haki outbreak, Mihawk naturally knew what it meant. However, the next scene made Hawkeye Mihawk, the world's #1 swordsman, not calm. On the other hand, even the sea restaurant, which was already far away, was also affected. Some diners who were not determined enough had no time to react to the Conqueror's Haki that had just erupted. They rolled their eyes and fell unconscious on the deck. Those who barely managed to hold on were breathing heavily, their faces turned pale, and they were filled with inexplicable fear and trembling bodies. What happened just now? Why does my body seem to have completely lost its strength? Hoo-hoo. Hey, wake up. What the hell is going on? Why is my heart filled with terror? Faced with the impact of Conqueror's Haki, these people had no idea what was happening, they only knew the inexplicable fear rising in their hearts. On the other hand, although the Straw Hat crew was very aware of the terrible pressure coming, they also showed shock on their faces. After all, the pressure that Benos had exploded this time was more than twice as terrible as before. Nami, Usopp looked at the battlefield in the distance that was hit by dark clouds and lightning, and asked Luffy in astonishment. Luffy, is there no bottom line to Benos' strength? This is too scary. We are so far away, but we can still be affected. Yes, is Benos a monster? Hearing the question, Luffy was full of pride, staring at Benos in the battlefield, grinning. Hee, Benos is serious this time. What? Nami, Usopp and Sanji beside him were immediately shocked. They had been in shock from the battle until now, and their horizons had also climbed out of the well to see this shocking scene. But now Luffy told them that the real battle had just begun, so how could they not be shocked? Back to the battlefield. End this battle. It's too early. Benos, who exuded a terrible pressure, held the black knife Thunder God, grinned and said seriously. Without waiting for Mihawk to react, Benos' figure sank slightly, and a flash of red light flashed in his eyes when he raised his eyes, and the pressure of conquerors around him continued to surge. Buzz. Boom. The powerful Conqueror's Haki and dark red lightning were more terrifying than before, and they kept raging around. The sky flashed with thunder and raged towards the sea. Benos closed his eyes and held the black knife thunder god tightly, and the next second, ZZ. The blade was horizontal, and the dark red lightning that was raging in all directions seemed to be guided, and it kept entangled with the dark blade of thunder god at a rapid speed. Black blade style. Extreme. The black blade in his hand, Lei Yu, swung, and the momentum was close to the point. Even though he was the world's #1 swordsman, Hawkeye Mihawk saw the dark red lightning and pressure concentrated on the blade, his face completely lost its previous indifference and turned into an extremely heavy face. He murmured solemnly, concentrating Conqueror's Haki to one point, "This is hegemony." At this moment, even he was not calm. He knew very well the significance and horror of entanglement with Conqueror's Haki. If only one person among a million people can awaken Conqueror's Haki, then those who can do Conqueror's hegemony are all at the top of the world without exception. This also symbolizes the birth of a sea overlord. And he witnessed this scene. You must know that this is East Blue, known as the weakest sea area in the 4 seas. Thinking of this, Mihawk looked at Benos, and there was no longer any gaze towards the newcomer in his eyes, as he did when facing those great pirates in the New World, or even the 4 Emperors' red hair. Bart suddenly raised his head, raised his hand and swung the black knife thunder guard, and with a low shout, the terrifying pressure even made Mihawk stunned for a moment, and swung it towards Mihawk on the opposite side. Whispering, "God avoid." Jung jung. The dark red enveloped the surrounding sea, and the terrible dark red slash made a sound of breaking through the air, shaking the sea, and swept over at an irresistible speed. Facing the tyrant slash that had the power to penetrate everything, Mihawk was ready, holding the black knife knight with armament Haki in both hands, and the next moment the muscles in his arms suddenly swelled. The terrifying sword intent unique to the great swordsman gathered on the blade, and slashed down towards the tyrant slash that split the sea. Jung jung. Boom. The surrounding sea was shrouded in dark green and dark red. The terrifying slashing confrontation set off a violent roar. While the sea under his feet was shaking, a large amount of seawater was forcibly separated to form a huge semicircle. Doo-doo. Boom boom. The terrifying slashing confrontation produced an explosion, and in an instant, hundreds of meters of huge waves were raised and swept in all directions. The center of the collision revealed a bottomless abyss and a lot of fog. At this time, 2 figures in the mist in the air were repelled by the aftermath of the explosion. Mihawk's figure appeared. At this moment, his body was no longer as cold and heroic as before. His black cloak was ravaged by the aftermath and became a little embarrassed. A powerful blow. Although it was unbelievable that Benos could wrap Conquerors around the blade and fuse it with the slash, this knife seemed to be missing something in his eyes, and there was still a distance compared to that man. But it was already very strong. There were very few people who could wrap Conqueror's Haki, even in the New World. This is enough to prove how terrifying Benos is in terms of talent and comprehension. On the other side, compared to Mihawk's embarrassment, Benos was slashed in the chest by the aftermath of the slash, bleeding profusely, and sat on the damaged deck floating on the sea. He was panting heavily, and his hands holding the black knife Lei Yu were shaking slightly. Although he still had the strength to fight, he knew that he had lost this sword duel. Of course, Benos was not disappointed. After all, it was good to be able to fight with the world's #1 swordsman Hawkeye Mihawk until now. He also realized the gap between him and Mihawk. Mihawk looked at Benos, who was slumped on the damaged deck with his sharp eyes like an eagle, and he no longer had the idea of going on. After all, his goal had been achieved. As for the request of the naval headquarters, to end the voyage of the Straw Hat Pirates when necessary. He was a Shichibukai, not a marine, and those orders had no effect on him at all. He exclaimed, "So far, you are the second person who can fight with me in swordsmanship." Benos knew who Mihawk was referring to, but he was still surprised. Mihawk's mouth curled up slightly, and he seemed to see the figure of that man in his mind. Then he reached out and put the Supreme Blade Black Blade Knight back on his back, turned around and jumped onto the small sailboat, and said in a deep voice, "Red-haired Shanks, one of the 4 emperors of the New World." Before leaving, Mihawk did not forget to glance at Luffy wearing a straw hat in the sea restaurant in the distance, and recalled meeting Red-haired who had just lost an arm. Red-haired. I bet it on the new era. Beanos watched the small sailboat go away, exhaled a breath of turbid air, looked around at the sea that was gradually recovering, and a strong sense of fatigue instantly filled his brain. Beanos. At this moment, Luffy and his group shouted from the distant Mary. Luffy stretched out his hands and grabbed Beanos and pulled him back to the deck before Beanos fell into a coma. Seeing the injury on Beanos' chest, Nami, Usopp, and Sanji were shocked for a moment and quickly took out the bandage to bandage it. Only then did they relax. Although the injury on Beanos' chest looked hideous, it only cut the surface flesh and blood, and did not hurt the bones. Compared with Zoro, who was still unconscious, it was much better. As for why Sanji appeared here, when Beanos exploded Conqueror's Haki and stunned many people in the sea restaurant, Captain Krieg took advantage of this opportunity and led the remaining crew to rob the sea restaurant. But under Luffy's strong crush, they were all beaten into the sea to feed the fish, which also made Sanji's originally restless heart loosen. Later, under Luffy's old-fashioned deception, he successfully joined the Straw Hat Pirates. Luffy was relieved to see that Beanos was fine, but his face was still heavy. He stared at the direction where Mihawk left, clenched his fists, and seemed to have made some kind of determination in his mind. He said secretly, "It's still too weak. As a captain, this little strength has become a burden." Although Beanos had said as early as when Mihawk appeared that the other party was from the naval headquarters to test their strength. But the terrifying power displayed by Hawkeye Mihawk made Luffy realize the huge crisis. If they can't even defeat Beanos, then the next voyage they face in the Straw Hat Pirates will be difficult. Seeing Luffy standing at the bow with a solemn expression on his face, Nami, Usopp, and Sanji did not disturb him, but carried the two injured people lying on the deck into the cabin lounge. Naval Headquarters, Marineford. In the office of the Marine Marshal, Sengoku shook the pen in his hand, looking at the door from time to time, as if waiting for something. Bang bang. Enter. Soon, an intelligence soldier walked in from outside the door. At this time, Sengoku, who had originally looked solemn, showed a trace of anxiety on his face and asked, "How is it? Did Hawkeye meet Monkey D. Luffy, Beanos and others? What is the specific situation?" Hearing Marshal Sengoku's slightly anxious question, the intelligence soldier saluted Sengoku and quickly told him the latest intelligence he had obtained one by one. "Yes, Marshal. According to the intelligence, 7 warlords of the sea Hawkeye Mihawk has already fought with the Straw Hat Pirates. And their battle was very fierce, especially the young swordsman named Beanos, who fought with the world's greatest swordsman for a whole day and night." Hearing the story, Sengoku's slightly anxious face suddenly showed a touch of shock, and it was obvious that the result of the intelligence had exceeded his inner expectations. Just as Sengoku fell silent, the door of the office was pushed open. Yes, it was Garp. He also rushed over after getting the latest news from East Blue. At the same time, Garp naturally heard what the intelligence soldier said just now, and was surprised. Fighting with Hawkeye Mihawk for a whole day and night. Beanos is getting stronger and stronger. As expected of me, he has grown into a pirate as powerful as those in the New World. Garp, who wanted to feel happy for him, suddenly realized something and his face became serious. He was really happy that Beanos was getting stronger, but he couldn't help but worry. You know, Mihawk is the world's #1 swordsman, who can even compete with the 4 emperors. Will Beanos and Luffy face this kind of top powerhouse? Thinking of this, the donut in Garp's hand broke completely with a bang, and scattered all over the ground. Sengoku naturally noticed the change in Garp's face and sighed deeply in his heart. For the sake of Marine and the calm sea situation, he could only feel sorry for his old friend. After all, the existence of Beanos has completely affected the situation on the sea. Of course, Sengoku was not thinking about feelings. If Mihawk captured the Straw Hat crew, he would let everyone go except Beanos. Sengoku shook his head slightly, ignored Garp who was gradually losing his composure, and continued to ask the intelligence soldier. What was the final battle situation? Did Hawkeye capture the Straw Hat crew? Yes, Mr. Sengoku, the latest intelligence did not mention that Hawkeye completely captured the Straw Hat crew. But in this battle, Hawkeye did not hold back. Hearing that Mihawk did not capture Luffy and the others, Garp was relieved. But Hawkeye did not hold back, which made Garp's face look even uglier. In his opinion, even if Luffy and Beanos were not caught, they would be seriously injured at this moment. On the other hand, Sengoku frowned when he heard that Monkey D. Luffy and Benos were not captured by Hawkeye. Although he was puzzled as to why Mihawk did not arrest the Straw Hat crew, he thought that Mihawk was not a marine after all, and considering Mihawk's self-willed personality, it seemed reasonable. Just as Sengoku was thinking about whether to question Mihawk, the Den Den Mushi on the desk began to ring. Sengoku looked down at the Den Den Mushi, which turned into a mustache, and quickly answered the phone. What's going on? Didn't I tell you to take down the Straw Hat pirates when necessary? On the other end of the Den Den Mushi, Mihawk's voice was as indifferent as ever, and he responded. First, I'm not marine, and I have no obligation to follow your orders, Sengoku. The information you want has been obtained. Hearing the response from the Den Den Mushi, Sengoku's face suddenly showed dissatisfaction, and even anger slowly rose, but still hindered by the strength of Hawkeye Mihawk, so he sighed deeply and asked. So you already know the strength of Benos, Straw Hat Luffy? Yes, I haven't tested Straw Hat Luffy, but judging from his aura, he is not as good as Benos. Chapter 51. It is the pirate hunter Roronoa Zoro who has a strong talent in swordsmanship and has great potential. Hearing the answer from the Den Den Mushi, Sengoku was relieved. This also meant that the strength of Straw Hat Luffy was not as strong as Benos, so he did not have to worry about two monsters on one ship. Garp, who was sitting on the sofa, was also relieved. So Luffy's safety did not have to be worried. Sengoku waved his hand to let the intelligence soldier go out, and found out Roronoa Zoro's information: birthplace, East Blue, Shimotsuki Village, age, 18 or 19 years old, three-sword-style swordsman. Nodding slightly, he continued to ask, "Tell me about Benos." As Sengoku's words fell, the Den Den Mushi was silent for a few seconds before speaking again. Benos, that guy is very strong. He is a monster rookie that I have never met before. Not only does he have swordsmanship that is infinitely close to that of a great swordsman, his talent and understanding are also quite terrifying. If he is given some time, he will definitely break through the shackles and step into the level of a great swordsman. Another important point is that the boy's two-color Haki is known as terrifying, the high-level armament color emission, and the Conqueror's Haki wrapped around the blade. What, Hawkeye, do you know what you just said? Swordsmanship that is infinitely close to that of a great swordsman, the high-level armament color emission, and the Conqueror's Haki wrapped around the blade. After these words came out, how could Sengoku still remain calm? His face turned pale in an instant. He originally thought that no matter how strong Benos was, he was just a rookie who could skillfully control the Conqueror's Haki. Who knew Benos's talent and comprehension were so terrible? Not only was his swordsmanship close to that of a great swordsman, but his armament Haki and Conqueror's Haki were not inferior to those old masters. Thinking of this, Sengoku looked at Garp, who was still leisurely chewing a donut, and suddenly his anger rose sharply, wishing to smash Garp's head right now. You said that you, an old guy, didn't contribute to the Marine. It would be fine if you went to the Marine Academy to teach the new generation, but you secretly trained such a terrifying monster in East Blue. The key is to let such a monster become a pirate. You Garp, this guy has a grudge against me. Feeling the cold murderous intent of Sengoku, Garp, who was sitting on the sofa chewing a donut, subconsciously felt a chill all over his body, and looked up cautiously. At this moment, Sengoku's eyes seemed to want to kill him. He couldn't help swallowing his saliva, scratching his head and said awkwardly. Ah, Sengoku, why are you looking at me like that? Don't worry, I didn't steal your treasured snack gift bag. HMPH. Sengoku snorted coldly and ignored Garp, who deserved a beating. Garp breathed a sigh of relief, but at this moment, he cursed Benos hundreds of times in his heart. Can't Benos take it easy? How can Sengoku accept that so many cards were exposed at once? No, when there is a chance, I will teach Benos and Luffy a lesson. But thinking back, it is understandable. After all, Benos' opponent is Hawkeye. If he doesn't go all out, Luffy and Benos will be in danger. Sengoku tapped his fingers on the table, listening to Mihawk's story on the other end of the Den Den Mushi. His face became extremely heavy. From this news, the kid named Benos now has the qualifications of those guys in New World. If he continues to grow, it is likely that the fifth king of the sea will appear in the ocean in a short time. At that time, even if the Marine Admiral takes action personally, he will not be able to stop Benos. Mihawk on the other end of the Den Mushi saw that Sengoku had not responded yet, so he simply hung up the phone. After all, the task entrusted by Marine Marshal had been completed, and he was not a Marine. Of course, Hawkeye still had some selfishness, although he reported all the information about Benos. But he realized that Benos at that time still had the strength to fight him. If he listened to Sengoku, the final outcome of the battle would be unpredictable even to him, and he might also be seriously injured. Sengoku put down the Den Mushi in his hand, and was silent for a while before accepting the young monster Benos. Without hesitation, he called the soldiers outside the door in and gave orders in a deep voice. Issue the bounty order for the Straw Hat Pirates. Upon hearing this, the soldier hurriedly asked respectfully. Yes, Marshal, I wonder how much the bounty for the Straw Hat Pirates is. Sengoku glanced at Garp expressionlessly and spoke in a deep voice. The bounty for the Straw Hat Pirates' 3 swordsmen, Roronoa Zoro, is set at 37 million berries. The Straw Hat Pirates' captain, Monkey D. Luffy, is set at 59 million berries. As for the Straw Hat Pirates' vice captain, Benos. Sengoku pondered for a moment, frowned and continued. The bounty is set at 300 million berries. Hiss. As soon as these words came out, the marine soldier took a breath of cold air. He didn't expect that a rookie pirate who was offering a bounty for the first time would be directly offered a bounty of 300 million berries by the Marine Marshal. Even if you search the entire sea, you can't find another one with such treatment. It's unbelievable. Marshal, is this HMPH, do as I say? Ah, yes, Marshal. The marine soldier naturally did not delay, and hurriedly took the Straw Hat Pirates member information in Sengoku's hand and left the office quickly. Ha 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 ha, as expected of my grandson, the first bounty is 300 million berries. Ha, Luffy's bounty is not bad either, it's 59 million berries. On the other side, while Sengoku had just arranged things, Garp secretly took out a bag of senbei from the snack cabinet where Sengoku hid, and laughed while chewing it. I have tolerated you for a long time, Garp. Die for me. Sengoku, who had been holding back a lot of anger, saw that Garp had stolen his treasured senbei, and he could no longer bear it, and raised his Buddha's palm and rushed towards Garp. Sengoku, do you have to be so stingy? However, Garp was not to be outdone, and quickly poured all the senbei in the bag into his mouth, raising his fist like a sandbag to meet him head-on. Boom! With a loud bang coming from the marshal's office, the 2 marine soldiers outside the door were instantly blown away. They all covered their aching heads and complained. These 2 are here again. Alas, when will this day end? ... As the bounty of the Straw Hat Pirates was completed, it began to be distributed all over the world. East Blue, Marine Branch. Kobe, who was preparing to sweep the floor with a broom, noticed 3 latest bounty notices hanging on the wall. He looked incredulous, rubbed his eyes behind his glasses, and said in shock. How is this possible? Mr. Luffy, Benos and the others are being rewarded. And the bounty is 1, 10, 100, a million, 10 million. Mr. Luffy is being rewarded 59 million Baileys. Mr. Zoro is also being rewarded 37 million Baileys. At this time, Kobe seemed to have overlooked something, and looked up at the highest bounty. The next second, his eyes widened under his glasses and he shouted in surprise. Mr. Benos's is 300 million. After a while, Kobe came to his senses and looked at the bounty of Luffy, Benos, and Zoro on the wall, muttering. Luffy, Mr. Benos and the others are already moving forward with their dream of freedom. I have to work hard to catch up with their footsteps and never let them fall far behind. Kobe clenched his fists, made up his mind at this moment, and whispered seriously. Luffy, Benos and Mr. Zoro, the next time we meet, we will be enemies. ... A week has passed since the bounty was issued. During this period, the Straw Hat Pirates on the Mary still did not know that they were bountied by Marine. Of course, the only thing the Straw Hat Pirates can be thankful for is that with the addition of Sanji, Luffy and Usopp no longer have to worry about Nami's dark cooking and play on the deck. On the other side, Zoro, who was lying on the sunny second floor deck, and Benos, who was also recovering from his injuries with the help of Nami and others. However, every time Zoro recalled the battle with Hawkeye, the double swords in his hands were easily cut off, which made him unable to let go like a nightmare. He couldn't help but ask Benos, who was lying not far away. Hey, Benos, how do you cultivate the power that turned your sword into black when you fought Hawkeye? Ah, are you talking about armament Haki? Benos was not surprised to hear Zoro's question. After all, Zoro must have deeply realized the huge gap in strength after the duel between swordsmen. He slowly opened his eyes and said lightly, "Indeed, if you awaken that power, your strength can be greatly improved." In fact, Benos had thought about the strength of the Straw Hat Pirates before going to sea. If the Straw Hat Pirates still sail according to the original plot, they will not be able to sail smoothly and freely. After all, his appearance has already changed the original. In addition, this battle between him and Hawkeye has probably been taken seriously by the senior management of Naval Headquarters. It is likely that it will not be long before Marine will find ways to attack the Straw Hat Pirates. Thinking of this, Benos no longer hesitated and planned to use the Enlightenment deduction to grant Luffy and others to quickly become stronger. The deduction of understanding, the gift, was already there when Benos awakened. But at that time, he was just practicing to become stronger, and he didn't understand it very well. Now it has become the key for the Straw Hat Pirates to become stronger in a short time. When Benos stood up and was about to call Luffy and the others over, newspapers suddenly fell from the sky above his head. Nami, who had just walked out of the second-floor room, saw this and reached out to pick up the newspaper that fell on the deck with a puzzled look on her face. The next second, her face changed and she was shocked. Captain of the Straw Hat Pirates, Monkey D. Luffy, bounty, 59 million Baileys. Oh my god, Luffy's head is worth so much all of a sudden. Nami looked at the bounty amount under Luffy's portrait, and her eyes suddenly glowed with gold. She actually had the idea of taking Luffy to the nearby Marine branch. Usopp, who was playing with Luffy on the first-floor deck, also picked up the newspaper and shouted in surprise when he saw the amount of Zoro's bounty. Zoro is also wanted by Marine, 37 million berries. He has become a big pirate all of a sudden. At this time, Sanji, who came out with juice in his hand, looked at the bounty on the last page of the newspaper, and his face turned pale. Said in shock, Benos, the bounty for the vice captain of the Straw Hat Pirates, 300 million berries. What, 300 million? Benos is so valuable. Hearing this, Nami was immediately surprised and quickly turned to the back to confirm. After seeing that Benos' bounty was indeed 300 million, she was no longer calm. Luffy and Zoro, who heard that they were wanted, were originally very happy about it, but when Benos' bounty was as high as 300 million, they were like deflated balloons. Luffy complained, "What, Benos, your bounty is so much higher than mine and Zoro." Zoro also showed dissatisfaction and retorted, "Yes, although you contributed the most this time, it's not the reason for the bounty to be so much higher." Benos also showed helplessness. Although he had expected it in his heart, he didn't expect that the Marine executives would suddenly give him a bounty worth 300 million. Is this considered special treatment? It doesn't make sense. Hey, what's with your expression? Actually, I don't want to show up, okay. Hey, what are you two doing? Stop. Rubber. 3 swords. Ouch. Oh my. Sanji and Usopp watched Luffy and Zoro chasing Benos, but didn't stop them. Instead, they watched the show with a glass of juice. Nami was holding the newspaper tightly in her hand, thinking in her heart, from the appearance of Hawkeye, and then consciously and deliberately targeting, as if all this was aimed at Luffy and Benos. Could it be that Marine had noticed Benos before? As the fight stopped, Benos grabbed Luffy and Zoro's joint attack, his face began to become serious, and he said, "Luffy, Zoro, after this, I think you have also realized your own strength." Hearing this, Luffy and Zoro were stunned, their expressions became serious, and they nodded heavily. Since Benos fought with Hawkeye, they have long known that the improvement of strength cannot be skyrocketed in a short time. Originally, they thought that relying on time, they could gradually catch up with Benos, but the appearance of Benos' bounty made them deeply aware of the serious crisis. That is, they have been valued by the top management of Marine. Benos looked at Luffy and Zoro, who were looking depressed, grinned, and without waiting for their reaction, he slowly stretched out his palms, and a mysterious wave began to emerge. Comprehension deduction. Grant. Bino's mind moved, and the mysterious wave completely enveloped Luffy and Zoro. Luffy, Zoro, hurry up and write down everything in the picture. Bino's looked at Luffy and Zoro, who were still puzzled, and urged loudly. In order to deduce the future pictures of Luffy and Zoro, plus the blessing of full-level comprehension, the recipient's mind needs to be concentrated. No. Luffy and Zoro, who were originally confused, heard Bino's urging, and quickly closed their eyes, and the pictures in their minds suddenly emerged one by one. Holy Land Mariajoy, Panger Castle, the highest point of power. Where is this? Luffy looked at the unfamiliar high-rise building in front of him, and when he was puzzled, a strong suction force swept him into an office. The 5 elders listened to the news from New World Wano-kuni Onigashima, and their faces were extremely heavy. They gnashed their teeth, angry and helpless. Rubber fruit. The world government of every era has been trying to recycle it. However, it has never been able to get it, not for more than 800 years. The zone fruit hosts the will. Besides, this fruit also has the name of God. Another name for rubber fruit. Zone human fruit mythical beast Nika form. Hearing the stories of the old men in front of him, Luffy scratched his head, puzzled. What zone mythical beast Nika? Am I not just rubber? I can't move. Luffy, who was still confused, was about to ask these old men when a bottomless vortex appeared behind him and swallowed him in an instant. Above the dome of Onigashima, dark clouds pressed down and dark red thunder raged, and waves of terrifying pressure shook the world. The 1,000-meter-long orange-red dragon opened its bloody mouth, and the terrifying hot flame forced the huge black fist to retreat again and again. Shouted, "What kind of world are you going to create? Straw Hat Boy, boom boom, create." Luffy, who was wrapped in smoke and silk ribbons, his hair turned into flames, and his whole body was covered in white in the 5th gear sun god Nika form, gritted his teeth and fell with a furious roar. Buzz. The huge black fist burst out with unprecedented shocking power, and instantly completely disintegrated the attack of the monstrous dragon. A world that can feed friends. Kaido. Boom boom. As the violent explosion sounded, the terrible pressure airflow swept across the entire Onigashima in an instant. Is this the future picture that belongs to me? Sun God Nika. Luffy, who witnessed the whole horror battle, stared blankly at a godlike figure and murmured blankly. At this time, the abyss vortex behind him appeared again, and Luffy was sucked in. Hoo-hoo. Just now, Luffy suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Bino's, Nami and others in front of him. His body was wet with sweat, and he was breathing heavily and muttering. Luffy, you finally woke up. You scared me to death. Luffy, why don't you say something? Nami, Sanji, and Usopp saw this and hurriedly walked to Luffy, looking anxious. Although Bino's had already told them the general situation before, seeing Luffy's current situation, they couldn't help but worry. Hoo-hoo. Luffy, who had finished sorting out the memories that had been poured into his mind, was about to raise his eyes to respond. Is this the direction of my swordsmanship improvement? Zoro beside him also opened his eyes. At this moment, he was wet with sweat like Luffy just now, as if he was still in a daze. Seeing Luffy and Zoro in a daze, still ignoring them, Nami and the other two didn't know how to start, and asked Bino's anxiously. Hey, what's wrong with Bino's and the others? Look like they are worried. Bino's glanced at Luffy and Zoro's expressions, and thought to himself, with full-level comprehension, while understanding the direction of improving strength, are they affected by the picture of their future? There was no worry on his face, but he grinned and said, Don't worry, they are fine. Let's go, give them time to sort out the things in their minds. Nami and the other two nodded slightly. Since Bino said that they were fine, they would wait for them to return to normal. On the other side, as the bounty of the Straw Hat Pirates was released all over the world, the villagers in Windmill Village, far away, looked at the bounty list in their hands and were shocked. Oh, Luffy's bounty is 59 million berries. Isn't this a true pirate overlord? Ha 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 ha. Our Windmill Village actually has a big pirate. I'm not done yet. A villager took out a bounty with Bino's portrait on it and shouted excitedly to the bar owner Makino. Makino, your brother Bino's has been offered a bounty of 300 million berries. What? 300 million? This is too scary. They are both more powerful than Ace when he went out to sea. The villagers stared at the bounty list of Luffy and Bino's, and cheered excitedly. I hope Beanos and Luffy can sail freely on the sea. Makino held a sleeping child in his arms, looked at the bounty pictures of the two, his face showed solemnity and worry, and murmured. Humph. The old village chief stared at the bounty pictures of the two and felt a headache. He frowned and said angrily, Ace, Beanos, Luffy, these three troublemakers are simply the shame of our windmill village. I should have tried my best to stop them before they went out to sea. How did Garp educate his children? They all became pirates. The back mountain of Windmill Village, a den of bandits. Nanny Dayton sat alone in the room, holding the bounty lists of Luffy and Beanos in both hands, with a look of relief and pride on her face, as if she was watching her children get good grades, and she laughed foolishly from time to time. Hey, what's wrong with the boss? He's in the room alone, holding Luffy and Beanos's bounty and grinning. Ah, is he provoked by something? Why don't we go ask? The two bandits nodded to each other, walked carefully into the room, and asked Dayton, who had his back to them. Boss, what's wrong with you? Are you laughing all the time? When did I laugh? Bandit, get out of here. Ah, yes, wait, go prepare a beast, I'm going to have a party tonight. Boss, please spare us, we are not Ace, Luffy, Beanos and the others, how can we? Get out. ... Located in the sea somewhere in the Grand Line. A man wearing an orange cowboy hat, with Madara on his face, bare upper body, showing his muscular body, and a skull with a pirate flag tattooed on his back. Take a small sailboat that relies on a flame-towing device and sail on the endless sea. Luffy, Beanos. Ace was eating pizza with one hand and holding the bounty that just fell from the sky with the other hand. The next second, his originally lazy expression became surprised. The vice captain of the Straw Hat Pirates, Beanos, fought alone against the world's #1 swordsman Hawkeye Mihawk. Ability: possessing a powerful swordsmanship that is infinitely close to that of a great swordsman, Grandmaster Haki. Gosh, is Beanos already so powerful? He can actually fight Hawkeye to a level of equal strength. No wonder Marine's first bounty was 300 million Baileys. Such a record is much better than what I had at the beginning. Luffy is not bad either, and the bounty is also 59 million Baileys, not bad. As expected of my younger brother. Quote, Ace had no doubts about Beanos' strength. After all, in order to rescue Luffy, Beanos cut off the entire Goya kingdom with just one sword. It's just that Beanos had just gone to sea for a short time, and he had already faced the world's #1 swordsman and was on par with him. This terrible record still made Ace surprised at Beanos' terrible growth. It seemed that even if he used all his strength, it would be difficult to defeat Beanos. Thinking of this, Ace couldn't help but recall the scenes of being beaten by Beanos. He felt unhappy in his heart and snorted coldly. HMPH. Don't be complacent, Beanos, I will definitely defeat you. Quote, New World, an unknown island. A large pirate ship is docked on the shore, which is the mount of red-haired Shanks, one of the 4 emperors, Red Force. As we go deeper, there are sounds of frolicking in the island, as if a lively banquet is being held. Red-haired sat by the campfire, drinking wine in big gulps, raised his eyes to the Hawkeye Mihawk opposite, and teased. Hey, rare guest, Hawkeye, are you going to challenge me to a duel this time? Faced with the teasing of the red-haired, Mihawk just glanced at the red-haired's empty left arm, shook his head slightly, and spoke expressionlessly. You have lost an arm, so I am not interested in you for the time being. The red-haired man choked on the wine that he had originally drunk because of Mihawk's words. After barely pounding his chest and swallowing it, he coughed twice and shouted dissatisfiedly. Who are you looking down on? Come on, I will chop you off. Quote. As he said that, Shanks wanted to take Mihawk to practice. This scene immediately frightened the red-hair pirates' crew, who shouted anxiously with horror on their faces. Boss, calm down. That's right, boss, calm down. They were afraid that their idiot captain would really have a sword fight with Hawkeye Mihawk. Of course, they were not worried that Shanks would lose, but they were afraid that once the two of them started fighting, the island might be completely sunk by these two guys. Mihawk shook his head slightly, and he did not mean to underestimate Red Hair. He came here this time because he wanted to confirm something. Confirm the matter and then decide. Seeing that Mihawk had no intention of taking action, Shanks sat back in his seat. He was also curious about what could make the world's #1 swordsman so serious. What is it? Quote, Mihawk did not respond, but took out 3 bounty lists, threw them into the red-haired man's hand, and said lightly. This straw hat boy and Beanos should be the kid I mentioned to me before. Looking at the portraits of Luffy and Beanos on the bounty list, Shanks couldn't help but miss the days in East Blue Windmill Village, and a smile appeared on his face. Ah, they are out to sea. Time flies so fast. It's the first time they are bountied by Marine, their bounty shouldn't be very high, hee. Mihawk was a little speechless. Is this guy's eyes used for decoration? He can't even see so many zeros. He said lightly, not much, Beanos only has a 3 in front and 8 zeros in the back. Huh, Beanos is bountied for 30 million Baileys, not bad, it's already good for the first time being bountied by Marine. Shanks, who was still immersed in memories, didn't even look at the bounty under the portrait, and responded subconsciously. Mihawk looked at the dumbfounded Shanks, a black line suddenly appeared on his forehead, and he shouted at Shanks. Eyes, ears, are you listening and watching? I said a 3 in front and 8 zeros in the back. You idiot. Shanks came back to his senses after being scolded, and stared at the string of zeros below Beanos's portrait, muttering to himself. Ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. After confirming that he had not counted wrong, Shanks could not help but curse, staring at Beanos's bounty of 300 million and Luffy's bounty worth 59 million Baileys. Marine has offered a bounty of 300 million berries on Beanos. Luffy has also been offered a bounty of 59 million berries. Is this true? Did Marine make a mistake? The first bounty is so high. Only Luffy's is relatively normal. The Red Hair Pirates officers who heard Shanks's story were all surprised. Although Beanos has been a genius since he was young, the first bounty of 300 million is too high. Shanks came to his senses and looked at the portrait of Beanos again. His face was filled with relief and pride. After all, he was also Beanos's swordsmanship instructor. Beanos and Luffy are much stronger than I was back then. Mihawk seemed to have noticed something. He stared at Shanks with a frown and asked in a deep voice. Did you teach the swordsmanship of the young swordsman Beanos? Hee, I guess so. Beanos has been a monster since he was a kid. Shanks recalled his time in Windmill Village and responded with a little embarrassment. Hearing the answer, Mihawk finally understood why Beanos' swordsmanship moves made him feel familiar. He didn't expect that it was taught by this guy in front of him. He continued to ask, so Beanos was able to wrap Conqueror's Haki around the blade, and you also taught him? Mihawk's words shocked all the red hair pirates present, including the 4 emperors. What? Conqueror's Haki wrapped? Back to East Blue Hozil Village, in the office of the Arlong Pirates Paradise Tower. Captain Dragon, who has dominated Hozil Village for many years, grinned and pushed the pile of gold coins on the spacious desk to the officer in marine uniform opposite. Yes, cooperating with you is a win-win situation. Evil Dragon, looking at the countless golden coins, Colonel Mouse's eyes revealed greed and smiled. As you said, cooperation between you and me is a win-win situation. Colonel Mouse, Evil Dragon's eyes revealed an inexplicable deep meaning. Both parties naturally knew the maintenance of interests, but no one would say it out loud. Colonel Mouse was not polite either. He signaled his assistant to bag the gold coins on the table, thought for a moment, took out 3 bounty lists from his clothes, and pushed them in front of the Evil Dragon. Evil Dragon was slightly puzzled and picked up the 3 bounty lists, and his brows were immediately furrowed. Because on these 3 bounty lists, Marine offered a bounty of 37 million Baileys, 59 million Baileys, and the last one was 300 million. Colonel Mouse, what do you mean? Oh, it seems that you haven't paid much attention to the sea recently, Evil Dragon. Evil Dragon looked at Colonel Mouse's gloating face, suppressed his inner dissatisfaction, and was full of doubts. He didn't understand why Mouse pushed the bounty list of 3 people in front of him, and even showed a disgusting look of gloating. You know, he didn't know any of the people in the 3 bounty portraits, and he even heard their names for the first time. Colonel Mouse, if you have something to say, just say it directly, no need to beat around the bush. Seeing that Dragon was still puzzled, Colonel Mouse stopped beating around the bush, staring at the portraits in the 3 bounty lists, fear in his eyes, and said in a deep voice. Dragon, I guess you haven't forgotten the little thief cat Nami. She is now in the newly rising Straw Hat Pirates. I don't think I need to explain the meaning of this. Dragon was stunned, and shock appeared on his ugly face. In other words, Nami, who had been exploited by him, actually found a backer behind his back. So, the 3 bounty lists in front of him were. Dragon shook his head and didn't dare to think about it any further. Although he didn't know why a newly formed new pirate group was offered such a high bounty by Marine. But the bounty is a symbol of the strength of the pirates, and the lowest bounty is higher than his own, not to mention that a bounty of 300 million is simply a threat to the existence of the great pirates. Looking at the increasingly ugly face of the dragon, Colonel Mouse narrated the events that shook the entire sea during the Straw Hat Pirates. What? Fighting with the world's #1 swordsman Hawkeye Mihawk to an evenly matched battle. In the end, Hawkeye won slightly, and that's the end. After listening to the story, the dragon's face changed drastically. He knew how terrible Hawkeye Mihawk was. Even the boss Jinbei, who was also one of the 7 warlords of the sea, had no confidence in facing that man. It can be seen how strong the world's recognized #1 swordsman is. That newcomer named Benos could fight Hawkeye to that extent, so it was natural that he was offered a bounty of 300 million. Thinking of this, the dragon couldn't help but sweat on his back, and his face immediately became gloomy. If it is true as Colonel Mouse said, Nami has now joined the Straw Hat Pirates, and it will not be long before she will come to trouble him. Dragon pondered for a moment, the gloom on his face disappeared, revealing sharp teeth like a shark, and sneered. Thank you, Colonel Mouse, for reminding me. I will handle this matter, and it will not affect the mutual benefit between you and me. Colonel Mouse was startled and looked at Dragon seriously. Although he didn't understand why Dragon was so confident, he would not care if his interests were not affected. Then he smiled. Really? I hope so, then celebrate your perfect solution in advance. After saying that, Colonel Mouse did not stop, and left the office with 2 bags full of gold coins. The evil dragon looked at the back of Colonel Mouse, glanced at the entire Kekexili village, and raised a wicked smile at the corner of his mouth, murderous, and said shamelessly. Straw Hat Pirates. Although we can't kill them head-on, threatening Nami to leave the Straw Hat Pirates automatically. On the other side, the Straw Hat Pirates sailing on the sea were about to arrive at their target, Kekexili village, at sunset. At this time, only Nami was on the deck, looking at the direction of her hometown in the distance, with a look of uneasiness on her face. As for Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp, after Benos conducted a comprehension deduction, and granted it, they all entered the cabin to digest the future images in their minds and the way to become stronger rapidly. At this time, a Den Den Mushi sounded, and Nami took out the Den Den Mushi in her pocket, and her originally uneasy face became solemn. After hesitating again and again, Nami still connected the Den Den Mushi, and then Nami's already solemn face seemed to be shrouded in fear. After the Den Den Mushi hung up, Nami stared at the direction of the Hozil village. Gritting her teeth, she returned to the cabin and glanced at the sleeping Luffy, Benos and others. She had already decided to obey the dragon's threat and leave the Straw Hat Pirates. She put a written letter on the table next to her, walked out of the cabin with all the Baileys, and looked around at the orange tree in front of her. Taking advantage of the night, she jumped off the boat that she had taken with Luffy, Benos, and Zoro at the beginning, and headed towards the Hozil village. However, Nami's sudden departure had already been noticed by Benos. The next morning, Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp looked around and did not see Nami, so they asked Benos. Hey, Benos, have you seen Nami? Benos naturally paid attention to the situation and did not respond. He turned to Nami's room and pushed it open. The room was empty as Benos expected. What's going on? Where did Nami go? Luffy and the others hurried into Nami's boudoir, looked around, and showed anxious looks on their faces. Benos was still lazy, glanced at a letter on the table and reached out to pick it up. At the same time, Luffy and the others came over. Luffy, Benos and everyone, I took away all the Baileys, you won't be angry about this. Hehe, thank you for your care during this period. Of course, the reason I agreed to become your navigator is just to use you. After all, I hate pirates the most. Benos touched the pen at the end of the letter, which still had a few traces of tears, and muttered to himself. Have you been threatened? Good job, Aunt, you succeeded in angering me. I thought that because of my appearance, the original work was changed, but I didn't expect that the evil dragon was afraid of the horror of the Straw Hat Pirates and forced Nami to leave. Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp, who were all around him, also showed signs of rage at this moment. Buzz. Just as the room fell into a brief silence, a strong pressure slowly rose from Luffy. Yes, it was Conqueror's Haki. After the future deduction of enlightenment, Luffy absorbed all the skills in his mind during this period of time, so that he awakened Conqueror's Haki in advance. But the control of Conqueror's Haki is still a long way from Bino's. Fortunately, Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp, who also went through the future deduction of enlightenment, made a leap in strength, so that they were not affected at all in the face of the pressure. Luffy, expressionless, turned around and slowly walked out of Nami's room, speaking in a deep voice. Let's go. Bring Nami back and beat the guy who threatens our partner. East Blue, Hozil Village. More than 10 years ago, East Blue was a beautiful village. With the invasion of a group of vicious pirates, it has now become dilapidated. The dragon pirates occupied this place and incorporated it into their territory. With absolute violent rule, they forced the villagers here to collect protection daily per capita, and even newborn babies were not spared. Once the villagers failed to hand over the protection Bailey, the dragon pirates would persecute and even kill the villagers who refused to hand over Bailey. In a rebellion, Nami's adoptive mother was shot and killed by the dragon pirates. Soon, Luffy, Benos and the other 5 people jumped off the Mary at the same time on the coast and walked quickly towards the village. However, the village at this moment was empty, and there was not even a villager on the street. Sorry. Bang. Seeing this scene, Sanji walked to the front door and kicked it open, and found that there was no one in the house. Then he retreated and shook his head slightly at Luffy, Benos and others behind him. Benos glanced at the tower in the distance. Were they all forced there by the dragon pirates? No need to look for them. I think these villagers were taken away by the dragon. I think they were threatening Nami. Let's go. Luffy and others looked up at Arlong Paradise in the distance. Their anger gradually emerged. They nodded slightly and walked towards the tower. Wait, don't go to Arlong Paradise. Leave here quickly. At this time, a slender girl with short blue hair opened her arms to block Luffy, Benos and others, and said with gritted teeth. Benos took a closer look and thought, Nokiko. Nami's sister. She and Nami were adopted by their adoptive mother Belmere since childhood. Zoro frowned slightly, put his hand on the 3 knives at his waist, and said. Enemy. No, my name is Nokiko, and I am Nami's sister who has no blood relationship with her. I know why you are here, but you should leave. The fate of Hozil Village was determined more than 10 years ago. Hearing that it was Nami's sister, Luffy's expression eased and asked anxiously. Since you are Nami's sister, you must know where Nami is now. Sanji, who was beside him, looked at the beautiful girl who looked like Nami, but his eyes lit up, wiped the drool from the corner of his mouth with his hand, coughed twice, and said with a serious face. That's right, Nami's sister, please tell us where Nami is now. Facing Sanji's malicious eyes, Nokiko subconsciously reached out to cover his chest, a hint of vigilance appeared on his face, and responded in a deep voice. I won't tell you, just leave here. This is not the place you can. Let's go, Luffy. Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Benos beside him. He was not interested in listening to Nosko's explanation at the moment. Yeah, Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp were the same. After all, they relied on observation Haki to sense Nami's breath. Hey, what are you doing? Stop. Nosko watched the Straw Hat crew bypass her and head towards Arlong Paradise. She wanted to rush forward to stop them, but she found that her body seemed to be imprisoned and unable to move. She could only stare at the backs of Luffy, Benos and others and stop them loudly. Luffy didn't even turn his head and spoke in a deep voice. I will bring Nami back, and as for that evil dragon, I will definitely beat him away. Arlong Paradise. In front of a magnificent tower, the evil dragon sat on a chair, and the strongest cadres of the evil dragon pirates stood on both sides of him. At the same time, below were the fishmen crew members and all the villagers captured by the dragon pirates. Bang! The sound of a heavy object fell heavily on the floor, and the gold coins worth 100 million Baileys in the bag were scattered all around. Looking at the gold coins scattered everywhere, the eyes of the Dragon Pirates crew members were shining, and they couldn't stop their greed. Nami looked expressionlessly at the dragon sitting on the chair, who was tall and strong, with sharp teeth in his mouth, a sharp curved nose, and a light blue skin. Gritted his teeth and said, "This is a gold coin worth 100 million Baileys, and I have completed it within the agreed time. Release all the villagers, and according to the transaction agreement, you have to leave Kekexili village." The dragon did not respond, but glanced at the fishmen near Nami, indicating that all the gold coins scattered on the floor should be thrown back into the bag, and then carried to the dragon. Nami, who wanted to breathe a sigh of relief, subconsciously looked at the villagers who were threatened by the dragon pirates. But seeing that the crew of the dragon pirates had no intention of letting the villagers go, she immediately felt uneasy and questioned Dragon loudly. "You have already got the Bailey coins worth 100 million, but you still don't let the villagers go." Dragon supported his chin, looked at Nami with disdain, and a wicked smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "If it weren't for the Straw Hat Pirates, I wouldn't have spent my time to force you to leave the Straw Hat Pirates. Now that you have no strong backers, you can continue to be used by me. You can't let them go." Nami was furious when she heard this, and she clenched her fists tightly, wishing to tear the dragons apart, but the villagers were in their hands, so even if she was angry, she could only swallow her anger. Question: Why didn't the previous agreement say that as long as I raise 100 million berries, you will no longer embarrass the villagers, and even leave Kekexili village? Are you going to break the contract? Break the contract? I didn't. Facing Nami's angry questioning, the dragon still propped up his chin, and the disdain in his eyes became more and more obvious, and he said sarcastically, "However, you are the first to break the contract. During the period when you raised 100 million berries, you were also considered a member of my dragon pirate group. And you joined the Straw Hat Pirates secretly. Are you planning to deal with me? In this regard, this gold coin worth 100 million Baileys can only be regarded as the price for your violation of the agreement. When you earn 100 million Baileys, the agreement between us will still be valid. And our dragon pirates will withdraw from Kekexili village." Hearing Dragon's rogue response, Nami collapsed completely. What agreement can't join other pirate groups? It's a joke. Dragon is deliberately making things difficult for herself. What else? Earning 100 million Baileys is pushing her to death. She has been saving this gold coin worth 100 million Baileys for a long time, and she almost lost her life for it several times. Now, thinking of this, Nami couldn't help it anymore. Her eyes began to moisten, and her whole body trembled. She glared at Dragon and cursed. "You fool, evil dragon, ha 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 ha." Looking at Nami, who was being teased by him, the evil dragon laughed at her. In his opinion, Nami was just an ant at his mercy. "Don't be angry, isn't it just 100 million Baileys? Just once is enough. Do you choose to give up? Give up these villagers of Kekexili village. Let them go to death." As he said, the evil dragon gestured to the men who held the villagers hostage. The crew of the evil dragon pirate group nodded, and took out their weapons and pressed them against the necks of these villagers. "No, don't stop." Nami saw this and ignored the grievance and anger in her heart. She gritted her teeth and shouted anxiously, "Don't hurt them, that 100 million Baileys. I will fight for it." As these words fell, Nami's whole body seemed to have lost all her strength and collapsed on the ground. Her heart collapsed and despaired. But as for the lives of the villagers, she could only accept her fate. "Ha ha ha ha, since you have made the choice, then earn 100 million Baileys peacefully. As for these villagers, I will help you protect them before you raise the money." The evil dragon laughed and was very satisfied with Nami's choice. The villagers who were held at knife point by the neck, looking at Nami, who was in a state of collapse and crying, were naturally heartbroken and shouted with gritted teeth, "Nami, go away. Don't worry about us. Leave here forever and don't come back." "That's right. Get out. We don't have people like you in Kekexili village. We don't need you to care." Nami looked at the villagers who were held at knife point by the neck, tears streaming down her face, shaking her head vigorously and shouting, "No, you will be fine. I will definitely earn another 100 million Baileys and take you out of the sea of suffering." Janju, who was lying on the ground with scars all over his body, raised his head with difficulty, his face ashen, and shouted angrily. Give up, Nami. These guys have been playing tricks on you. Even if you earn 100 million Baileys, they will not let go of Kekigzili village. Let's go, don't worry about us. Go find your partner and fulfill your dream on his sea. Who told you to talk, old man? Bang! The crew of the dragon pirates behind him raised their maces and hit Kensuke's back hard. The huge force made him spit out a mouthful of blood. Puff! The villagers saw Kensuke spitting out a mouthful of blood, and they knew that the dragon pirates would never let them go. Instead of dying anyway, they could only buy time for Nami to escape. For a while, these villagers rushed to the dragon pirates and tried their best to fight for Nami's life. What are you still standing there for? Nami, run, leave Kekigzili village. Ah, the villagers fought back desperately regardless of the weapons in the hands of these fishmen, but in front of the dragon pirates, they were just struggling to death. With the order of the dragon, the crew of the dragon pirates instantly suppressed the villagers who resisted. The dragon glanced at Nami with a hint of sarcasm and said teasingly, as long as you dare to turn around and leave here, I can't guarantee that I can continue to protect these villagers. Hearing this, Nami, who was sitting on the ground, trembled all over, deeply in grief and at a loss. Tick 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 tick. Tears dripped down her cheeks and fell to the ground. She held her head tightly with both hands. Facing pain, helplessness and despair, she didn't know what to do at this moment. Screaming in grief and anger. Why did it become like this? What should I do? Boom boom. Suddenly, the steel door behind Nami was blown open. The huge sound stopped the villagers who wanted to resist and everyone else. The dragon's face was even more furious, and he looked at the figures in front of the door. Tap tap. The leader was the boy wearing a straw hat. From the moment he smashed the door, he lowered his head and walked slowly towards Nami. Nami reached out to wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes, turned her head and looked at Benos, Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp, led by Luffy, and her inner grievances seemed to be released. With tearful eyes, she looked at Luffy, Benos and others with hope, and asked for help. Luffy, Benos and everyone, help me. Hearing this pleading voice and the face full of despair, Luffy, Benos and others did not respond, but the angry expression on their faces represented everything. Luffy clenched his fists, still lowered his head and came to Nami, reached out to take off the straw hat on his head, and put it on Nami's head. Without stopping, he walked straight towards the dragon sitting on the chair. At this moment, Nami could no longer hold back. Looking at Luffy's back, big tears fell across her cheeks and dripped onto the ground. When the dragon saw the physical features of the visitor, he recalled the 3 bounty list portraits that Colonel Mouse had taken out before. The originally disdainful look gradually became solemn. Although he was puzzled, Nami was not forced to leave the Straw Hat crew by him. Why would these guys chase after her? But looking at the situation, it is not the time to think now. Since they have become enemies, they can only kill them all. Even if the bounty of these guys is very high, he has hundreds of fishmen under his command. He does not believe that these guys alone can defeat his dragon pirates. Thinking of this, Dragon looked at the Straw Hat crew with murderous intent in his eyes, and raised his hand to signal his younger brother below. The crew members of the dragon pirates took out their weapons and rushed towards the gradually approaching Luffy. It seemed that they would tear Luffy to pieces. You low-class ants, go to hell. Kill, kill, swoosh. Hey, you scum should stay out of the way. Suddenly, a figure instantly passed by Luffy, glanced at the crew members of the dragon pirates who were surrounding him, and spoke lazily. Buzz. The originally lazy eyes suddenly became sharp, and the red light in the pupils flashed by, and the terrifying pressure swept around in an instant. In an instant, the whole scene was like a frozen frame, and the crew members of the dragon pirates who rushed up stopped in place, and the weapons in their hands fell to the ground one after another. Plop. Bang bang bang. The sound of falling to the ground continued to sound, and these fishmen who rushed up foamed at the mouth, rolled their eyes, and lost all consciousness and fell to the ground. Wow! The villagers saw these ferocious pirates fall one after another. Their heads were still in a state of confusion, and they had no idea what was going on. The dragon sitting in the chair could hardly believe what he saw. These were the warriors he had carefully selected from his hometown, but they were completely knocked down in just a moment. What did that guy just do? Why did he have such terrible power? The dragon stared at Benos, who appeared behind Luffy, and his originally disdainful eyes were filled with fear. Tap tap. Just as the dragon was stunned, Luffy's figure had already arrived in front of the dragon. The moment his feet stopped, Luffy, who had been lowering his head, suddenly raised his head. His face had long been filled with anger. He quickly raised his fist, his eyes wide open, and roared. Dragon. The speed of the fist was so fast that even if the dragon came to his senses, he could not dodge it. Bang! The fist with a strong force instantly hit the dragon's ugly face. Puff! The dragon's face collapsed instantly, and a large mouthful of blood suddenly spit out of his mouth, and his whole body flew backwards like a cannonball. Boom boom! The tall tower building behind him was blasted with a big hole in an instant, and then collapsed with a loud bang, and smoke and dust filled the air instantly. The villagers widened their eyes at the sudden scene. They never thought that the evil dragon that had dominated for many years would be blown away by a young boy with one punch. And what kind of terrifying power is this, which can destroy this tall tower with one blow? Nami was helped up by Benos, with a gentle face, reaching out to help Nami wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes, and said jokingly, "Once you get on the pirate ship, how can you get off the ship halfway? What do you think, Nami?" Nami, who reacted, was stunned and quickly hugged Benos, pouring out all the grievances she had suffered over the years. Benos. Sanji, who was dealing with the small fry behind him with Usopp, saw Nami hugging Benos tightly, and suddenly became furious and gritted his teeth. How could Nami hug that guy Benos? This benefit should have been mine. Usopp, speechless, stretched out his fingers and rubbed Sanji's shoulders, saying, "Ah, Sanji, this is not the time to talk about this. There is another large wave of fishmen from the dragon pirates coming from behind. After I deal with these small fry, I want to duel with Benos." Sanji heard Usopp's reminder, and his eyes left Nami and Benos, who were still hugging tightly, but his anger became stronger and stronger, and his body rushed towards a large wave of fishmen as fast as lightning. Bang bang bang. Ah ah. Under Sanji's sweep, violent screams continued to ring out. Bang. At this time, a stone fell from the top of the ruins that had been blown down, and then a big hand suddenly stretched out from the piled-up ruins, and the dragon climbed out with difficulty. Ahem. Holding his hand to the sharp nose that was crooked by Luffy, he gasped and spit out a mouthful of old blood, staining his chin red, and his face became shrunken. This punch almost killed him directly, but at this moment he was seriously injured. I thought the Straw Hat Pirates were just newcomers who had just gone to sea, and no matter how strong they were, they could deal with them according to their own strength. Now it seems that he made a serious mistake. These two people are simply ridiculously strong. Just a momentum can knock down the carefully selected warriors. At the same time, the strength of the skinny monkey is quite terrible. Realizing the gap in strength, the dragon ignored the injuries on his body and quickly stood up and fled in the direction closest to the sea. However, how could Luffy let it go? He raised his hand, clenched his fist and swung it to his side. In an instant, the muscles on his arm began to surge violently, steam rose from his body, and his skin turned red. Swoosh! Luffy entered the second gear, and his all-round ability was greatly improved. He appeared in the air above the dragon's head with just a teleport. When the dragon saw Luffy suddenly appear in the air in front of him, his face suddenly changed, and fear rose in his heart. He kept shaking his head and muttering in disbelief. How is it possible? I have already launched my full strength, why can this skinny monkey still appear in front of me? This time Luffy will not hold back, and his arm suddenly stretched out. Rubber rubber. Pop. The originally stretched arm was suddenly covered by the pitch-black armament Haki, and the speed of his body was so fast that he could not even react to how Luffy's figure came in front of the dragon. He could only stare at the pitch-black fist and hit his head directly. Jet pistol. Bang. The dragon, who was unable to react at all, suddenly spat out a large mouthful of blood, and his originally tall figure hit the ground behind him. Puff. Caw caw caw. Boom boom. The terrifying force instantly stomped down the hard ground, forming a big pit. Why, how could it be? No matter how unwilling he was, facing Luffy's absolute strength, he was completely like an ant. As his vitality gradually disappeared, the dragon's shark-like pupils completely lost their color. On the other side, Under Sanji's crazy sweep, the crew members of the dragon pirate group who came to support were piled up into a small hill. Oh, well done Sanji. How long will Benos take advantage of Nami-chan? Calm down Sanji. Benos brought Nami to Luffy. Nami looked at the lifeless dragon in the pit and couldn't help but exhale a breath of foul air. At this moment, she felt that the shackles in her heart were completely over. Benos thanked Luffy. Luffy, Benos. Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Luffy and Benos. We are partners. Nami. Nami was stunned, looking at Luffy and Benos with burning eyes, then reached out to wipe away the tears of gratitude and smiled. Yeah, at this moment, a roar came. Benos, let Nami-chan go. Nami-chan, don't worry, your most loyal knight is here. Swoosh. Beef feast. Sanji's figure appeared above Benos's head, raised his steel-like right leg, and kicked it down fiercely. Benos, who had reacted, was speechless for a moment, thinking, is this guy done yet? It was just a hug. Why is there such a big fuss? Is it because of the future deduction of understanding, that Sanji's dog-licking problem is superimposed? What a trouble. Benos raised his fist without hesitation and blocked the flying kick head-on. Bang. As the strong collision sounded, the airflow continued to surge around. Nami, who was taken away from the attack range by Luffy, looked at the two people who maintained a stalemate. A black line passed through her forehead, and after a deep sigh, a smile appeared on her face. She deeply felt the complete sense of being protected by her partner. Luffy ignored the two people who were fighting, but looked around the surrounding area, as if looking for something. Asked Usopp not far away. Huh, where's Zoro? Wasn't he with you guys before? Why is he gone again? Ah, didn't he get lost on the way again? It's possible. Just when Luffy, Nami, and Usopp were trying to find Zoro, who was a directionally challenged person, a figure slowly walked over from the gate in the distance. Looking closely, it was Zoro who had disappeared for a long time. Not only that, Zoro was holding a man in a marine uniform in his hand. Benos stopped playing and looked at the guy in a marine uniform in Zoro's hand, with surprise on his face. Ah, no wonder Zoro wasn't seen before. It turned out that this guy got lost and ran directly to Colonel Mouse's territory. As a result, Colonel Mouse's group of Marines were killed by mistake. Seeing the culprit, the evil dragon and Colonel Mouse were completely solved by the Straw Hat Pirates. The villagers who got a new life cheered loudly, and at this moment they didn't have to be dominated by these cancers. Great, the haze that enveloped Kekexili village has finally dissipated. We have finally escaped the control of the evil dragon and Colonel Mouse. The Straw Hat crew saw the villagers cheering and smiling. At this time, Luffy took a deep breath and shouted to Nami on the opposite side. Nami, become our partner. Move towards the dream of freedom with us. As the loud voice echoed, the villagers who were originally cheering stopped their joy and looked at the two of them, smiling on their faces, waiting for this moment. Nami was stunned. Her eyes were instantly wet, and she nodded vigorously in response. Yeah, Benos looked at this scene and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. In addition, he is now the 6th person in the Straw Hat crew, and the next plot is Logue Town. I really look forward to the future adventure. As the cancer shrouded in the haze was removed, the Hozil village at this time was no longer the lifeless scene when Luffy and his friends first came, and it became very lively. In order to celebrate the hard-won new life and to thank the Straw Hat Pirates, the villagers took out all the Bailey and food looted by the Dragon Pirates. A grand banquet was held on the street. As the delicious dishes were served, the Straw Hat crew naturally did not hesitate to eat crazily. Woo woo woo. Luffy was like a perpetual motion machine, stretching his hands back and forth on the long banquet table, constantly stuffing food into his mouth, making his originally bulging mouth become huge. Luffy, can you eat slower? The chef uncles can't keep up with your eating speed. Nami glanced at the busy and sweaty chef. Looking at Luffy's outstretched hands, constantly grabbing food, she was speechless and said helplessly. And you Benos, you too. Bang. However, halfway through eating, Luffy's chewing mouth stopped and fell on the table. Hey. Luffy, Nami, Usopp and the villagers around them were shocked when they saw this. They ran to Luffy and everyone was stunned the next second. They saw Luffy lying on the table, bubbles coming out of his nose and snoring from time to time. Ah, this guy fell asleep while eating. Benos was a little helpless. Facing Luffy's personality of falling asleep while eating, he couldn't help but think of Ace and Garp. Bang! After about a few minutes, Luffy, who was originally asleep with bubbles coming out, stretched his body, opened his eyes, and continued to eat. Huh, why are you looking at me like that? Everyone was stunned and wanted to rush up and beat him up. Nami and Usopp even pinched Luffy's neck, and shouted with anger. Don't fall asleep while eating. ... The next morning, Luffy, Benos and his gang were waiting on the coast of Kekexili, but they had waited for 2 hours and had not seen Nami. This made Usopp ask, Luffy, will Nami? Impossible. Luffy interrupted directly, looking at the village in the distance, and said firmly. I believe Nami will come. Sanji lit a cigarette, his expression became solemn, and he thought to himself, Nami-chan, you will definitely come, right? Zoro was half lying on the guardrail, looking at the Kekexili village, silent. Swoosh. Benos shook his head slightly, not intending to wait any longer, and moved his body, quickly heading towards the village. Hey, Benos, what are you going to do? Sanji and Usopp were also surprised to see this, and asked loudly. I'll pick up Nami, and pull her hard by the way. As soon as these words came out, Usopp and Sanji were shocked, and the cigarettes in their hands almost fell. Benos is usually so lazy, when did he become active? Ah, Luffy did not oppose Benos's move, but followed Benos's footsteps and ran towards Nami's position. As Benos said, they are pirates, there is no need to be so particular, if the villagers stop them, just take Nami away directly. ... On the hillside, Nami knelt in front of a tomb, telling how the dragon pirates were destroyed and the news that the Hozil village regained its freedom. Aegean behind him had a complicated expression, looking at Nami's back, and spoke with a little worry. Nami, are you really going to go out to sea as a pirate? The villagers behind him also showed their worries. In their opinion, there are no cancers like the dragon pirates and Colonel Mouse in Hozil village, so Nami should not have to go out to sea to take risks again. Yes, the dragons have been dealt with, and my dream should come true. I want to draw maps of all the seas in the world and become the most powerful navigator on the sea. This is my dream since I was a child. Hearing Nami's answer, Ken and the villagers nodded heavily and said no more. After the incident of the dragon pirates, they also established a certain trust in the Straw Hat group, and thought that Nami would not be in danger with them. After all, the strength of the Straw Hat group is simply a monster in their eyes. Nosco nodded in agreement, recalling that they went to Arlong Paradise without hesitation before. Obviously, Nami's importance in their hearts has become a mutual bond. Nami, I support you. We are the same. Although these villagers still have resistance to pirates because of the dragon, the appearance of the Straw Hat group has made them have a different view. Of course, they approve of Nami's decision. The endless sea is free and vast. Unfettered and free, it's a pity that I am old, otherwise I would also like to roam in this sea. Go, Nami, sail freely on the sea with them. Realize your inner dream. Nami looked at the villagers who all supported her decision, nodded heavily, and the complicated emotions on her face turned into a smile. Don't worry, since Nami is on our ship, we will naturally not let her be in danger. At this time, a cold voice sounded, and Benos' figure appeared behind them at some point. Lord Benos, I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.